Give me a minute. I'll just copy this one file for the
Welcome to day 2 of the WISE
Sure.
2013 conference. Day 1 was a splendid event, I believe, and I'm looking forward to our second, well, more than a half day of presentation. And thank you so much for coming. Our first speaker will be John Torok, who is a resident of Oakland, California, and has lived in the UK and other parts of the world, and has a fascinating story. He's a lawyer and a PhD, and a very accomplished person, and also a Weiss legacy. His late father, Stephen Torok, was the very first Weisser I ever met 12 years ago, and John came aboard a number of years later, but it's a pleasure to welcome John to Adrian. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right. I first actually like to thank John Eiper and Adrian College for hosting us for this event. John has, as we all know, done a superb job of getting us organized, getting us where we need to go, and doing what we need to do. So thank you very much, John.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for making the trip on the red eye from the West Coast.
I also want to say, as you know, I live in Northern California. I went to Berkeley, sometimes known as the People's Republic of Berkeley. I live in Oakland and work in San Francisco. So I want to say I'm very grateful to the community that is Weiss for helping to ensure that I do not suffer from the loss of contact with reality. So my presentation today is going to combine a bit of a reading of a paper which has the unfortunate and unwieldy title of Reflection in Some Context on Oakland's Decolonize Occupy Moment. I will then talk a little bit and then open it up for questions. So as I should mention that in line with the principles of the Occupy Wall Street movement, I do not speak for the movement. I speak as an individual participant. All right. Wall Street is the physical site of a vanished wall built by enslaved Africans to protect colonial settlers against resistance from Manhattan's indigenous peoples. To occupy Wall Street now is thus, in physical and symbolic terms, to challenge the power of both capitalism and colonialism. The Occupy Wall Street slogan, "We are the 99%, is a metaphor for a political reality. While the U.S. has formal elections, the mass of the people have lost control of their government to concentrated corporate and financial capital. Thus, American elected representatives do not serve the people. The Occupy Decolonize moment may be seen as a collective cry of pain resulting from the consequences of that reality. That the highly concentrated corporate media was tone deaf to this critique should surprise no one. The corporate shills of the two wings of the Capitalist Party distract us all. United States representative democracy today is the best democracy money can buy. Wall Street, of course, is a metaphor for American and global capitalism. The phrase "Occupy Wall Street" rather than Washington implies a criticism of the absence of people power, even though the U.S. has routine electoral cycles. In 2011, the Wall Street occupation captivated the imagination of thousands of Americans who joined in hundreds of physical occupations of the public square throughout the country. Occupy Oakland and Occupy Wall Street both drew inspiration, and some philosophy and participants, from the global justice movements of the late 1990s to the early 2000s. That was an earlier moment of transnational resistance to unaccountable, Earth-scale financial and corporate power. Occupy Oakland and Occupy Wall Street further drew inspiration from resistance against austerity in places like Spain, Greece, Portugal, similar rebellions in South America, the Chavista Revolution, and from popular rebellions that overthrew dictators in Tunisia and Egypt. All these were in significant part youth movements. Now I want to illustrate when the Oakland Police Department shut down the Occupy Oakland encampment on October 25, we got a message from the sisters and brothers in Tahrir Square in Egypt, which said, Cairo and Oakland are one hand. And we responded, Oakland and Cairo are one fist. And so there is sort of transnational real-time communication between these various activist uprisings in different places. For many in Oakland, mere survival is resistance. Widespread poverty followed both the deindustrialization and decommissioning of some large military facilities that earlier supported the city economy. Oakland is known for its violent crime rate. The city is the seat of Alameda County, which is one of the top 2 county contributors to California's prison population via the school-to-prison pipeline. Oakland's police department is notorious for its racist brutality against the town's brown and black populations, its corruption, and its excessive use of force against peaceful demonstrators. The young comrades in their 20s who set the tone for the U.S. Occupy uprising grew up with personal electronic communications devices. They are highly networked. They have instant access to news of social struggles and their repression, not only in this country, but all over the world. Occupy Oakland often expressed solidarity for people's anti-austerity and pro-democracy struggles elsewhere. We thus engaged routinely in internationalist mass political education on Oakland's hard streets. I am grateful for what I learned from the young comrades. I often miss their generational presence and the continuing work. At the core of Occupy Oakland, as elsewhere, was direct democracy expressed through the General Assembly. And the General Assembly was essentially a meeting in the public square. If you showed up, you could join in the conversations, propose a topic for discussion, make a proposal, argue, and vote. Formal proposals required at least 3 individuals to bring it to the facilitation committee to put on the General Assembly agenda for discussion and decision. Either consensus or modified consensus was sought once that proposal was thoroughly discussed at General Assembly. Some name the decision-making process form horizontalism, in contrast to the top-down hierarchical decision-making of most U.S. societal institutions. Consensus process was cumbersome, as its premise is allowing everyone physically present who is so moved the opportunity to speak. It thus involves a lot of listening and required willingness to learn from the diverse perspectives of those present brought with them. Even so, the participatory decision-making in the Oakland public square worked surprisingly well and surprisingly frequently. This contrasts with the professional political class in electoral office, wholly bought up by the special interests whose money they need to run election campaigns. It is these interests that the term the 1% points to. Interests someone once referred to as malefactors of great wealth. The GA consensus, the General Assembly consensus process, proposed an alternative and often an empowering vision and practice of shared governance by, for, and of the people. In sum, the Decolonize Occupy moment highlights how, from the perspective of the people, there is a democracy deficit. For the ruling class, by contrast, the surplus of democracy is terrorism. Democratic Mayor Gene Kwan's administration ordered the Oakland Police Department, with the cooperation of federal, state, and local law enforcement through the federally funded Counterterrorism Fusion Center, to remove the Occupy Oakland encampment. Police force against an American mass popular assembly to articulate grievances almost killed Iraq War veteran and peace activist Scott Olson. Dozens of others were beaten and arrested, incarcerated, and hundreds were tear gassed and otherwise brutalized. Images of repression circulated globally. Now I'll make a couple points here. One is, in total in Oakland there are about 800 arrests. And Oakland is the 47th largest city in the country, but we had about 10% of the arrests nationwide. So we had a considerable focus of the state. The other point I would make is, if we compare ourselves to Cairo, we have to understand we had one person almost killed, but in the anti-Mubarak demonstrations, 800 people were killed. So obviously there are significant differences between Cairo and Oakland. We recognize that. There is in Oakland presently a proposal to expand real-time anti-terrorism surveillance designed for the Port of Oakland to the entire city of Oakland. Funded by the Department of Homeland Security and subcontracted to a security intelligence contracting company, SAIC, that we hear is known in its industry as NSA West, it shows that the Oakland's citizens and residents are viewed by their elected officials and selected administrators as terrorists. This suggests, again, a bit of a democracy deficit. Oakland's mayor and city council instantiate, it seems, the citizen as terrorists for a broader American public. Okay, so that's the written part. I want to sort of talk a little bit about, there's been stories in the news about how the economic recovery has not been benefiting broad sectors of the American economy. It has only been benefiting the very, very wealthiest Americans. And so for the 20-somethings who were the core and the largest component in terms of numbers of the Occupy Wall Street movements, conditions really have not changed. It is still, many of them are unemployed or are, holding down multiple jobs, attempting to, keep it together with very limited resources and very few, if any, career opportunities and expectations of being able to live well are very different from their parents and their grandparents' generation. So this, I think, is the other thing that kind of underlies the Occupy uprising, is this generational sense of we've been written off. I'm a little bit older than the 20-somethings, but I'll speak in that sense. And so I don't think Occupy, or something like Occupy, is over. It's taken a form. When I came here, I had come from the party. You have the little flyer that I sent around. That was the 2nd anniversary. And so we've just hit our terrible twos. We'll see what happens. And I would say, to conclude, I'd say I see the Occupy movement or moment as an American uprising against a democracy deficit, notwithstanding the existence of formal elections, coupled with a sense of disempowerment because of both bureaucratic statism and bureaucratic capitalism. And I welcome questions and discussion and comment. Bienvenido. Go ahead. Yes, you, and you.
Okay, the Occupy Oakland, how many days from the time it started and to the time that the mayor called the police to disperse? How long was it?
Okay, so the encampment started on October 10th. It was dispersed the first time on October 25th. It was reestablished around the 27th and then dispersed a second time around November 2nd, I believe.
So there were 20 days of occupation.
Right.
What do you feel you've accomplished for the movement?
I think for the Occupy Wall Street, the main thing is the shift in the national conversation. Poverty and economic injustice were sort of not on the radar at all, and now it is. Professor Wheely, I saw your hand.
Yeah. What sustains your great faith when you know that on your internet the NSA is watching every one of your messages?
Yes, it is a good question. I mean, I think that...
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, okay. Professor Wheely asked, what sustains your great faith when you know that on the internet the NSA is watching every one of your messages? Well, I think that there is, and I don't think this is only on the American left or liberal side, there is a sense that having the government watching the citizens all the time is not exactly what we signed up for when we said we believe in American democracy. Now, that the NSA doing domestic surveillance, of course, and the awareness of that in the broader public is a consequence of Edward Snowden's leaks and the journalism of Glenn Greenwald. And I know Snowden is a controversial figure. I would say on the left, he is analogized and seen in positive terms in the same way that the Pentagon Papers guy is seen. I think that for people who are not on the left, it's a little bit fuzzier whether he should be seen in positive regards. And certainly for people who are currently in the state apparatus, many would regard him as a criminal or even treasonous. I think that there is a vision of American government being by, for, and of the people that is fairly deeply rooted in the cultural DNA, if we can say such a thing exists, of this country. And so when there are efforts by the government to overstep its role, then I think there tends to be backlash. Now, how exactly that's going to come about, I am not sure. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, and you were first back there, so let me go with you.
I'd like to hear, this is Blake Culver of Rocket Ventures, Toledo, Ohio.
Okay.
Do you have any examples of voters being disenfranchised in the Oakland area?
I am not aware of any, but I'm not following local electoral politics that closely.
I'm just curious what role, if any, that may play in what you're referring to as the deficit of democracy. I'd be curious if anyone could shed light on that data today.
Okay. My sense is many people have written off electoral politics. Not everyone in Occupy has, but many people have.
We couldn't hear you.
Say again?
Couldn't hear you.
Okay. I would say many people in Occupy have written off electoral politics. Not everyone has, but many have. There are people, certainly because the ethic is individual participation, when people show up and say, I'm working for such and such a candidate, they tend to be dismissed. But it's open exactly what's going to happen in terms of any conjunction between Occupy and that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Follow up on Gabriel's question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is the message? I mean, I watch this on TV,
Mm-hmm.
and you see a rebellion, you see a bunch of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the message that we're supposed to get out of this?
Right. I would say it's the main message is there are problems, right? there's a slogan which sort of articulates it concisely and which uses language I probably should not use on CNN. S is effed up and BS, right? That is the sort of resistance refusal moment. In terms of the projects that people undertake to attempt to address the situation, there's been a broad range of them. Some of them are to engage in reform, like within Occupy Wall Street, there's essentially a formation to reenact Glass-Steagall, which was the legislation that kept investment banking and commercial banking separate, which was removed during the Clinton administration and then created the conditions for the most recent crash. There are projects but a big part of what the resistance refusal moment created was a whole lot of new people coming together and thinking about different kinds of solutions. So, as far as what is our agenda or goal or political project, I would say there's a wide range of them because there's a wide range of participants focused on different things. I personally have become part of an organization or group of people called Oakland Privacy Working Group, which is seeking to stop, real-time surveillance with big data collection and, facial recognition, license plate recognitions by the police department of the city of Oakland against the people who live in Oakland, because I don't think that's right. But, that's one project. I don't know if I answered your question. Randy, and then Robert, and then I'm going to do. Are there any? Oh, and then over here. Okay.
Was it Randy?
Randy.
Randy. Okay. John, I appreciate the presentation. That said, I've been coming to California since the days of Stokely Carmichael and Angela Davis, the Brown Berets, the Chicanos, the Cesar Chavez movement, the Weathermen, the Black Panthers, and all the rest since the 60s. Considering the fickleness of the media and the short attention span of the general public, why should Occupy be treated any differently or remain in our sights these days?
So the question.
Why is it different from the Weathermen, the Black Panthers, the Chicanos, the Brown Berets, and Angela Davis, who says power to the people movements?
Right. So the question was, how is Occupy different from earlier left social justice movements in California, like the Black Panthers and Free Angela Davis and so on, and why should we pay more attention to it? Is that a fair statement? Okay. I'm not sure that it is. I think it's a moment of criticism, a moment of resistance. It may be another moment like all those earlier moments, right? But I think what may be different is the capacity for things to scale up as well as scale down extremely quickly. We had the Oakland encampment shut down on October 25th. The following General Assembly, about 3,000 people showed up to. And then on November 2nd, we had the Oakland port shut down, where somewhere between 30 and 50,000 people showed up. So we went from, 1,000 people to like 30 to 50,000 people in the space of less than 2 weeks. I think that that's one of the things that the highly mediated, networked world that we now live in has changed in terms of the capacity and speed of mass mobilization against some perceived injustice. In that case, the attack on Scott Olson was, I think, promoted a great deal of outrage across a broad range of people's of the American political spectrum, which is why we had such a big turnout so quickly then. I don't know that left social justice projects are going to be any more successful than the ones in the past have been in the United States. But I would say that many people see what we're doing in Occupy as in some ways a continuation of that earlier work. I don't know if that fully answers your question. Okay. Robert.
There's a lot actually, and I'm going to try to keep it short then. And I do have kind of like a follow-up. What do you mean in this by direct democracy? I mean, I keep hearing them discuss this, of direct democracy, and what do they mean by it?
That is a good question. General Assembly is a meeting of people in the public square. People talk, people make proposals. In our case, it's consensus, but you can vote proposals up or down. I think there's an ideal, maybe a wish, of this idea of the town meeting as the form of governance, and I think in some ways the Occupy General Assembly harkens back to that ideal of self-governance.
No, I agree in a certain sense that ideally the town meeting is this great thing, but we've got this country of 300 gazillion people.
Right.
It's kind of hard to get people together. And because I'm always reminded that as I even mentioned to Roman just the other day, Benjamin Franklin once said, perfect democracy is where two wolves and a sheep sit down and vote on what they're going to have for dinner. And
I so move.
And a constitutional democracy, a constitutional republic is where at least the sheep is on. I mean, I've always kind of liked the idea. I mean, the thing is, if you go back to the time, into like, what is it, when the Athenians slaughtered the people of Nilo, they did it on perfect democracy. All right, they changed their minds later, too late, they didn't get the internet was down that day, I guess. At least that's what my children think when they just, call on use a cell phone or something. That I think what, and you and I have talked before, it's just that as Americans, we're always upset that we don't have this perfect republic. And there is no perfect republic. But we're always striving for it for some reason, which isn't bad. I mean, man, what is it? Shakespeare said something about stars and things and reaching and something like that. I
think it was Browning.
Pardon?
Robert Browning.
Is that Browning? I thought it was Shakespeare.
Go for it. You're referring to, but a man's reach should exceed its grasp, or
right.
what's a heaven for?
That's right.
Browning.
No. It was actually Machiavelli. No, just kidding.
You got my automatic.
You're on.
Yeah. But what I was trying to say is that it just really seems that, I've gone through this with the 60s. And I got a brother still living in England who thinks the draft is still after it. It's that kind of a world. But it's in the end, like you were saying, and direct democracy is the thing that really bothered me with the whole thing. When they would mention it, and you have it here on the paper, everybody kind of knows what they mean by direct democracy, but it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to you as it does to me. I mean, it's like in Egypt, you have these people, one man, one vote, one time, in a sense, with the Muslim Brotherhood. Is that democracy or not? I mean, all of a sudden, well, we won, so I want all of them back in purchase. I mean, it was democratically decided. These kinds of things. It gets confusing when you go from the ideal to where the rubber hits the road.
No argument from me. Can you phrase a question?
That's it.
Okay.
I'm gonna follow up.
Here.
I want to follow up on your statement.
Lois, actually.
Her?
Yeah, I think that Lois, Paul,
both
and
of you
Bienvenido, so
on
this.
the side of his finger.
Yeah.
I wanted to, well, first a very brief question.
Mhm.
You keep talking about October 10th and so forth. What year are we talking about?
2011.
2011. Okay, good. Now, Bob and I live in Ohio, as you know, and in our town, there's a little group, that's gotten together that calls themselves Democracy Over Corporations.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that brought it out was the Citizens United decision.
Supreme Court case,
Yeah, I mean,
2010.
in 2010, in which it suddenly becomes corporations are people, therefore they can spend unlimited amounts of money in certain respects in campaigns, okay? And we're interested in amending the Constitution. This isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of California, you can go back to Santa Clara case,
Mm-hmm.
which has been shown. It wasn't even
It's a railroad case.
yeah,
Santa
criminal
Clara
case.
versus the.
But it was not part of the case where they talked about, it was just the introduction. It wasn't the case itself.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they began citing that corporations were people, especially after that time in 1886 or whenever it was, okay?
Mhm.
So, you have these questions of democracy or republic, which you brought up, Democracy was ancient Greece. That's what we learned at Stanford in Western Civ. But what kind of democracy are we talking about? The democracy did not include the slaves, did not include the women. It was a very small group, basically, of the male citizens who were the democracy. You talked about the republic. That's the Roman. That's representative government. Well, now we have people in our state and all over the United States who are trying to set things up in such a way that it's no longer one man, one vote. It's already in Ohio, Republicans are in charge, and they have redrawn the districts so that they will win. And they have tried nationwide, as I understand, to set it up in such a way that it will be by congressional districts, not by the statewide thing. So instead of having, a million more votes who are Democrats, but still don't run the Ohio legislature, you're going to have, 12 out of 17 congressmen are Republicans now. They're going to try to set it up in such a way that it'll be by congressional districts, and which they have drawn, and then it'll be maybe all Republicans in the legislature, in the Congress, okay?
I don't know why she's addressing this.
You brought up Representative
Yes, I did,
Torok.
but the thing is, I don't want to be.
Let me do this. Do you have a question for me, Lois?
Well, I think you folks maybe are giving up too soon on representative government. You've got to fight back. You've got to
Okay.
have things like democracy over corporations, local politics.
Personally, I would say, I haven't written off electoral politics, but I cannot speak for everyone in the movement. I agree. The Citizens United case, and there's like Citizens United number 2 coming up, I understand. So the accession of the corporate form to personhood in a constitutional sense, meaning the same rights as human persons, is a real problem, and I know that there's a national movement called Amendment 28 to reverse Citizens United by constitutional amendment. So I'm glad to hear there is also this group that you just introduced us to in Ohio, because I know some of the people elsewhere who are doing that. But as to where things go on the linkage between participants in Occupy and electoral politics, I think it's still, broadly speaking, an open question. I have Paul, I have Bienvenido, and then other.
Since she was addressing me before we go on.
I don't think she was addressing you. I think she was addressing the big question. Okay, 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Okay, basically what I wanted to say was that I'm not an official spokesman for the Republican Party. I don't belong to the Republican Party. But I would like to say that as far as gerrymandering goes, every political party when it gets into any state gerrymanders that state. And in California, when I was a resident there, if you look at it in the all the way to the 1980s, there were more registered Republicans than there were Democrats. And this is from the Democratic B and everything finding this out. And yet the Democrats had 2/3 of the legislature because of gerrymandering. And they do it in Texas, they do it in every state where when the Supreme Court says you gotta carve these places up to make them more equitable, that just opened the door for more gerrymandering.
Okay. I have Paul, I have Bienvenido.
So we have Paul, and I'm gonna have to be the timekeeper here.
Okay.
Paul and Bienvenido, there's some.
Follow up, I want to clarify. It's possible, like this question about disenfranchisement. You used the phrase, which I want to highlight, but I think for some fact, a number of people read it off as saying something like that. Clarify, what I want to clarify is, are you saying they dropped out of voting? They were disenfranchised by some electoral process where they just ignored by the people who actually are elected? I wasn't clear exactly what that meant.
I'm sorry, I didn't really hear the question.
He wants a definition of enfranchisement.
Enfranchisement.
You said people, and I think the word was written off, in answer to Blake's question about disenfranchised. And what is that, do you mean they dropped out of the system on their own, or were they disenrolled from the electoral system, or did their representatives just ignore them? It was a little unclear.
Okay. I think, I'm not sure I remember the question and the response.
But his question was distant.
Yeah. Okay. My own sense is, okay, so there are issues around attempts to limit electoral participation in certain parts of the country through new forms of electoral regulation and legislative control. I'm not aware of any such formal mechanisms for disenfranchisement through either legal or regulatory change in Oakland.
He meant, what did you mean when you got the impression that people wrote off, have written off the electoral system?
You mean people in
Well,
okay.
that just mean that we just gave up on the system?
Right.
Or is there something further, some more legal definition of it?
I don't think that it's not a legal definition, it's a political decision that the electoral process
So
is
just give up
irrelevant.
on the voting idea, on the
Yeah.
idea of voting.
Yeah.
It's like my colleague in political science says he's tired of hearing students say that their vote doesn't count.
Mhm.
He says, of course your vote counts, it just doesn't matter.
All right. Yeah, but
He said that the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act
Mhm.
was the cause of or one of the major causes of the crisis.
Mhm.
My question is, why did you not occupy Congress? Why did you not protest Congress?
Well, I think.
Why did you go to Wall Street?
Right.
When it's the Congress that's making the law.
Well, the Glass-Steagall repeal happened during the Clinton administration,
Yes.
and I think I believe that there probably was protest, but for us I think for generally in the I use that as an example of one issue that was being addressed by a subset of people who were participants in the Occupy movement. I don't think it's the only issue, and I don't know all the details of what has happened around that.
That's what I don't understand with the protest movement. They go after the president when it's the Congress that's making the law. If the president, say Clinton, vetoed it,
Mhm.
all they have to do is wait for Clinton to get out of office and they'll pass that bill. It's always the Congress.
Right. I think there have been protests in Congress against Congress. But
Thanks, John.
we'll move right along, and I'd like to introduce the newest WISER to join us at this conference, Dr. Anthony J. from Austin, Texas. He is native of Madrid in Spain and has had a very interesting life and career in the military, and now he is a historian. And he'll be speaking about a very interesting moment in history, which is the transition to democracy in Spain, beginning with the death of the caudillo, the dictator Francisco Franco in 1975. In a way, this was the first moment of transition from an authoritarian government to a democratic system in really, it's sort of a foreshadower of the post-Soviet era and then throughout Latin America and elsewhere. So I would love to give the floor here to Anthony. Good luck, Jim.
John, thank you for your very kind words.
Book of Horns.
Thanks to you all. And that's a good word.
Speaking to the mic, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
You cannot move.
You know, I was used to command cavalry troops by the voice. I don't need at all. Don't worry. Or is a problem with the... Sorry about that. You know?
Technology gets us all.
Yes. And I have to confess that I'm not a tech guy at all. But don't worry, okay? I will abide by the rules, no matter what. Okay. I'm gonna try not to bore you much and not entering into unending topics and issues, but I would like to start taking the lead that this wonderful lady, I mean you, my friend, yes, you just said when you started talking about democracy. I'm going to talk about democracy, I'm going to talk a little bit about history, and if I may say in an old sentence, what goes around comes around. And today, Spain, I will say that the actual situation is a situation of political failure, represented by the lack of political freedom and authentic democracy, widespread corruption, and loss of national identity. I won't be able to go ahead with my lecture if we'll be in Spain, even if it is a democracy. I'll be either shut up or I will have been given any floor to pronounce my conference. And I know well how the situation it is, even if it is already a long time that I haven't been in Spain, but I still have contacts, not really much family, but friends, and I keep in touch with several universities over there. But let me tell you that before going a little bit ahead and keeping that, I will explain some of these pictures to you later on. Let me tell you that with so much going on at the present times, I mean, we in the United States, why we bother about Spain? Spain is a tiny country. It's the one-third of Texas, populated by 45 million inhabitants, and without much to say in the world nowadays. However, Spain is not only a nice country, it's a place where sometimes it's convenient to go, it's a nice place for going on holidays, and for us, and let me employ, even if I was born over there, for us Americans, Spain stealing from British writer and author William Chislett, maybe if it hadn't been for Spain, perhaps the United States might not be what it is today. And I don't mean just because tomorrow we are going to celebrate Columbus Day.
Today?
Oh, today, yes, sorry. Yes, it is today. It's true. It's true. Columbus was actually Italian, that's for sure, no matter whatever, and whoever may say different things. But he was acting not on behalf of Spain, and this is something that we are going to unveil. When he landed somewhere in the island of Cuba or wherever, what he said was, in the name and on behalf of the kingdom of Castile. The word Spain was entirely unknown to these guys at that time. However, Spanish contribution to the United States has been a real interesting and important one, even if it is not much known. But we have now a gentleman who is joining us from Toledo, Ohio. In Toledo, Spain, once upon a time, in the 1500s, for those of you that may not know, was the capital of Spain, not Madrid. It was Toledo. Later on it was Valladolid. Toledo was the capital of Spain under the Emperor Charles I in the 1500s, when Spain was a real power in the world. And today, again, and stealing from another of my favorite writers and poets and singers, Bob Dylan, the only success is failure, but failure is not a success at all. So, what is going on really in Spain? I can say that, for many years we understood the transition of Spain into democracy as a miracle, a bloodless and peaceful event that took a country from dictatorship into modern democracy. But the problem is that miracles happen only in the science fiction novels, and I don't want to appear to you very agnostic. Perhaps only, I have a daughter that is a nun, by the way. Yes, a Catholic nun. And she lives in Roswell, New Mexico. She's over there in a monastery. And maybe in religion miracles happen, but certainly miracles do not happen in politics. The so famous German miracle was due to hard working by the German people and of course by the Marshall Aid Plan, not by a miracle. And the Spanish miracle, as we can say today, has been a big cover-up. And when I was talking to John about maybe contributing to this, my first attendance to a WACE conference, saying, can we talk about Spain? Because Spain has been a real main topic in WACE. And that's why I started getting into WACE when I was doing some research about the late Professor Ronald Hilton, And I was advised to get in touch with you also by another very famous professor that even he doesn't contribute much, Stanley Payne, that he's a very extreme, well read in Spanish history and one of the best authors that I can manage to know today. But let me say that maybe stealing again from not my favorite author and writer, the 43rd President of the United States, Bill Clinton, when he said, is the economy stupid? In the case of Spain, I'm going to say that no matter what is the economical crisis at the moment, it's not the economy stupid, it's the political class over there. and that's pretty different. And then let me go quick about, this is a Time edition in Spain, in Spanish, and they said Mariano the Slow. He's the president of Spain now, Mariano Rajoy. The picture in the middle is a pact that took place in 1976 between all the political parties, and we are going to talk about that. Today, you know, in retrospect, with so many people starting telling what happened, how was it, and so on, we can manage to establish, if not the full truth, a substantial part of it. And over there you see two guys in Spanish military uniform, General Franco and the present king. And we'll talk about this. 1975, General Franco died, and then long live the king. Juan Carlos was appointed king on the will of Franco only and lonely. The Spaniards never vote for Franco, never at all. They never got the opportunity to express their feelings. You can imagine Adolf Hitler naming as his successor a prince of Bayer with the title of King of Germany. I mean, taking away the comparison that Franco was not so cruel and let me say assassin as Hitler was, Franco was a dictator. Even if he was maybe a mild dictator, he was a dictator, and as a hard ruler at a particular moment of his life. Later on, he became kind of a grandpa and was much more tolerated by the Spanish people. But this is something that when I put over there the law of 1947, Franco appointed not the king Juan Carlos, because Juan Carlos in 1947 was a baby, a small boy. He all of a sudden managed to get a law, the law of succession, approved by him and approved by a fake parliament, the so-called Cortes, that was entirely people that Franco said yes, everybody said yes, of course, everybody, without any doubt. And at that moment, Franco decided that after him, Spain will be a monarchy, without appointing who will be the king. But why Franco did such a stupid thing? For one reason. He was scared and afraid that once Germany, the Axis powers, had lost the war, he will not last for long. The only excuse he had to continue going on was saying, hey, at a particular moment, I'm stepping out. And then this country is going to be a monarchy. And that for a while fooled President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill in England. For a while. What happened later on is that in the early 50s and late in 1949, the Soviet Union exploded the first atomic bomb. In the Korea War came, the whole Western world started to be frightened by the possibility of a communist and Soviet threat, and they decided to go on with Spain because who cares in reality. In 1953, the United States recognized Franco government and established formal diplomatic relations, and because it was a big pressure from the US Navy mainly, and still there is a major US naval base in the south of Spain, in Rota. That's a key base, and today it's also part of the anti-ballistic shield system that is being established in Europe. So for the United States and even for Great Britain as well, I think Franco was not a problem anymore, and let's go on because we have a much more pressing problem with the Soviet Union and so on and so on. Spain, you can see here what happened immediately. When Franco was dead, the king appointed another act of democracy, a prime minister, without consulting anyone. Who was the first prime minister? Adolfo Suarez, the guy with the white uniform that is taking an oath in front of the Bible or whatever. That guy that appeared to be, to most of the world, a real democrat and so on later on, was a former member of the Falange, the fascist party in Spain. And here I wanted you to see that picture where he is wearing the uniform of the Falange. But who cares? Spain in the period 75-81, in the 76, the Spaniards vote the so-called law for the political reform. The Francoist system had a structure. It was no constitution at all, of course, but they were based in root to the so-called fundamental laws of the national movement. 7 laws. The law for the political reform became the 8th law of the national movement. The law of succession that I was talking to you before, when Franco decided that the monarchy will be restored again, was the 4th fundamental law. The law for political reform, this is a Machiavellian game in reality. That law for political reform was establishing how to get rid of the other laws. So it was kind of a game. Let's vote for a law that will be the 8th fundamental law, and that law is going to get rid of all the existing laws except one. Guess which law? The law of succession. Because otherwise, if the law of succession establishing that Spain will be a monarchy is abolished, how we are going to have a king? And who did that? The king, his advisors, and whatever. The Spaniards were looking and saying, well, nobody even moved. 1977, first general election, without political parties. Some. The whole thing became later on. Even if just 2 months before the elections, the Communist Party and the Socialist Party were legalized in a way. The thing about making legal the Spanish Communist Party was another trick. And I wonder if my friend Boris will agree or not, but the Spanish Communist Party at that moment, in order to be legalized, broke all the links with the Soviet Communist Party, saying, now we are Euro-communist. What was Euro-communism? Nothing. Euro-communism was for Spaniards, for Italians and French, a trick, because nobody wanted to be a communist anymore. And what happened is that the Communist Party in reality betrayed the real communists in Spain, becoming a capitalist party and joining the situation, with the others. 1978, first constitution. Well, it wasn't the first, because 200 years ago it was another constitution. But this constitution were abolished, and the constitution was not having the same value as our constitution. It was a bunch of papers establishing everything, and was presented to the Spaniards to vote. Everybody was voting. Here I want to see that picture, because that was how they did the propaganda to the people. People that for more than 40 years have never go to polls and voting. And they were saying, vote democracy yes or democracy no. What the hell? Of course people will say yes. And what that means? They didn't know. They were voting yes. And with that vote, the law for political reform, the general election later on, the constitution, and in 79, general elections again, because the king wanted to have everything under control and give the appearance to the world that Spain was the most democratic nation on earth. Spaniards were for voting almost once a year without taking into account local and municipal by-elections or whatever. What happened, and I didn't want to bother you with figures and whatever, was that every year people were getting, how to say, tired, sick and tired of voting so much after having not voted at all in more than 40 years. So at the last voting in 79, the attendance to the polls was like 70%, only 70% of the voting population. So, yeah, it's a lot, but at the first moment in 76, it was almost 95%. So it was a decline. And today, 65% last elections, whatever, things like that. So the people became really tired about politicians and so on. 1981, that will be, I've been tempted to talk about this for long, but that will be just the case for a unique and lonely presentation about that. Because what happened on February 23rd, 1981 was something that hasn't never happened in recent years in Europe, in Greece a little bit earlier, but everybody knew, and I want you to take a look on that, the French magazine Paris Match, 2 days before the so-called military coup, was saying Spain's economic situation is on catastrophe. There is the ascent of a coup d'etat in the air. And many newspapers, everybody was talking about that possibility. To me, the fundamental question is why, if everybody was talking about that, everybody knew, everybody was suspicious of that a plot or a coup was about to happen, nobody did anything to stop it. Why? And then 18 hours, not a single wounded or killed, absolutely not. Nowadays, and when we talk about, let me go to the aftermath, not a single army unit and no regular military officers and enlisted men joined the so-called rebellion. Only the equivalent of the French gendarmerie or the Italian carabinieri, only. They took the parliament for 18 hours. After that, they surrendered peacefully. They did some shooting against the ceiling. And you can tell me, what kind of a coup is that? People shooting to the ceiling and not shooting to the people and to the government they were supposed to get rid of. The only place where some military units were on the street with some tanks, like a tank battalion went onto the main roads and streets, but, and you are going to have fun with this, and it's a fact, I checked it with people that took part in this event, the tanks were in column, respecting even the traffic lights. No ammunition on the tanks. The tanks went in a column, they made a tour and came back to the barracks after several hours. When the general commanding the military district in that region got the order of the king, stop it and put the units back into the barracks. So, what was the problem? It's something that you can see over there. The real coup, in my opinion, didn't fail, because the real coup and plot was to make the coup fail. in order that the king will appear as the savior, the whole savior, a wonderful democrat stopping the military. But whose military? There were none. Only the kind of police, because the civil guard in Spain is a police force, is not an army unit, a military unit. So what was the problem? Nobody knew. In the end, it was a kind of court martial for the people involved. About 30 people went to jail and lost their military or careers. Military people, there were 3 generals, and then the rest, couple of majors, 1 lieutenant colonel that I can recall, and the rest, about 25 people, were policemen, not any army unit or military as a whole or whatever. And then that happened. The trial ended up without solving real questions. After very few years, everybody that went to jail was put in freedom. And end of the story. 1982, first socialist government, Mr. Felipe González. He lasted 14 years, as much as Andropov in the Soviet Union. Yes. Sorry, Brezhnev. Yes, yes. Sorry, yeah, Andropov that quickly. And
few months, right?
I'm not going to enter. At the beginning, everybody was thinking, well, you know, I left Spain after the so failed plot, when I realized that something was not right over there. The legacy of Felipe González. Felipe González ended up in 1996 in full corruption, with about 25% of people unemployed, a big debt, and sometimes when I'm talking about the debt, we are not talking about the deficit or whatever. I'm talking about real debt with foreign banks, you know, money that they have to pay back, not kind of macroeconomic figure. After such a corruption scandals, even eavesdropping from the security service on the king and authorities in the country and whatever, 96, 2004, Mr. Aznar's conservative government. We can say that he had to struggle with difficult problems that were very difficult, if not impossible, to surmount. But Aznar, taking everything into account, did well, but he never really faced the big problems of the country: the unemployment, debt, and corruption, because all that was a little bit underneath, and nobody was able to tackle with the problem. 2004, 2011, we said nobody at the helm, because you know what happened. It was 2004, a terrible terrorist attack at main South Madrid railway station, and Spain was out of the coalition and the war from Iraq all of a sudden. I'm not going to enter into Iraq. I think most of us, we agree that Iraq was wrong. But, I mean, Spain joined the US Army and the British Army. They were together over there, and in the end, ultimately, they failed to their compromise, because they withdraw in an unilateral way, and you don't do that with your allies, either right or wrong, you know. That's how I feel. And I know that many military people, officers and so on, were really outraged because the situation. I said, we are not discussing if it's right or wrong to be here, but we came. We are alongside our American friends, and now a socialist government, afraid of Al-Qaeda or whoever, is saying, oh, come on. What the hell was that? And Mr. Rodríguez Zapatero, you see what happened. he won't be judged by the Iraqi issue or wherever. He will be judged on his handling of the gravest economic crisis his country faced and Spain was facing, and his popularity fell to zero. He had advanced elections in 2011. The elections were supposed to take because it was his second term, and he was supposed to go on until 2012, but he couldn't get any longer. And then we got that. And now, wow, I was really shocked because conservative government came back and situation is worse than ever. Today, Spain has above 27% of average unemployment in the society. 50% of unemployment in the people between 25 and 40 years old. Young graduates are leaving the country, going to Germany and the UK mainly, in Europe, because it's easier to go to Europe because the Schengen agreements, wherever, and you know, if you are a member of the European Union, you can go anywhere and you can relocate yourself wherever you want, even Sweden or Denmark, without asking permission or whatever, because this is like that within the European Union. And I'm not going to enter anymore into the situation regarding the monarchy, but you know what happened in 2012 with all the crisis, all the debt, unemployment. The king, Franco's king, appeared in South Africa hunting elephants in the company of a beautiful blondie. What the hell? And he came back and said, oh, I think I did something wrong. But he didn't say what. What was wrong? To go hunting elephants, to go with a blondie, to use the money of the state for his trip, or what? He didn't say it. But today, corruption is so widespread that it's reaching the conservative government, the socialist government, the monarchy, not only the king, his son and son-in-law and daughter-in-law have been indicted by a court, but they have fled, and the daughter, the Princess Christine, lives now in Switzerland, by the way, and this is the situation. So I was talking yesterday to John, and I said, what is going on? Because I think that movement of Occupy whatever started in Spain. Yes, in a way. And I said, where are these guys? And you know, sometimes we exchange ideas in the web, and I was writing to one of our Spanish Catalonian wazers, and I said, what is going on in Spain? And he sent us an idea, and I think he was pretty much accurate. I think Spaniards in Spain are hostage of a kind, not of a democracy, and that's when I go back to my lady. It's not a democracy, it's a partitocracy. What that means? That the political parties, without consulting and taking into account the opinion of the people, are ruling the country. And that's, I don't know how to put the first, let me go to that. This is what Jordi Molins is saying in a way. The picture in the middle, that was taken in '76 and reveals kind of a pact between left, right, nationalist parties, and so on. My conclusion is that in Spain today, everybody lies. Everybody is lying to each other. The parties are lying to their electorate. The king is lying to the country. The government is lying to the European Union, because sometimes the figures that appear as economic indexes and whatever are not true, cannot be true. They say, we raise the economic output this year. So how it comes? If now you have more unemployed than the year before, what is happening? Is a miracle? What? So nothing stands. So my view is that Spain in a way is going to explode, and maybe it will be like a kind of Balkanization, like Yugoslavia, Catalonia, the Basque Country, wherever. It could happen, anything, and the monarchy will be finished, of course. But why I'm telling you all this? Because we can say we don't care. There are their problems. But first of all, let me tell you, Spain has a big debt with the United States government. Several billions of dollars. And there are many US companies in Spain, General Motors, Ford, General Dynamics, many companies. So it's important because it could affect many people. And Spain was considered to be the fourth largest economy in the European Union. So if it fails, like somebody said, it is too big to fail. No, if it's failed, it is too big and will make a big noise. And it's going to affect everybody. Not because you are big, you cannot fail. I mean, or fell down. Of course, you will fall, and then the noise will be incredible, like when an elephant falls down. Anyway, I don't want to bother you more. Thank you for your attention. Whatever questions you may have, and I'll be able to answer, I'll try to do it. Thanks to these ideas and whatever, I'm thinking maybe writing a book and getting too much into details, because I think it would be needed. But that is another idea.
Right. Before placing my question, I will make three very short comments. Franco was not afraid of Britain since 1943 because there existed a secret agreement between Franco's generals and Britain, who were getting a lot of money. So he knew very well that Britain would not interfere, and that was the reason why Franco did not let Germany
I will answer to that. Yeah. You're right, but there are some little things about
right.
that.
For him too, Franco. I'm anti-Franco pro-Republican very much, I have to say that, from the very beginning. But he had led the rebels from 1936, managed to win the civil war in 1939, and has governed until 1975, which means 36 years.
Yeah.
Now about the legacy of the law of succession. As you know, in Russia, in the year 2000, there was no law of succession. Nevertheless, Yeltsin appointed Putin. After 8 years, Putin appointed Medvedev. Medvedev made it twice, 6 years. Medvedev appointed Putin again, and Putin probably will reign the country forever. So, the question is, do you think that monarchy is the problem of the present day for economic situation in Spain? And something else?
Let me tell you, but before, I'm going to answer that straightforward because it's a topic that I like, and sometimes at the UT in Texas, in Austin, I've been explaining that to some students. But first of all, Franco was not afraid of Churchill. First of all, because England has always had secret channels of communication with Franco's government. And actually, keep in mind who was helping Franco to take over the army of Africa at the moment of the rebellion, of the military rebellion.
Germany and
No. Before that, Franco flew from the Canary Islands to Morocco on a plane that was put at his disposition by His Majesty's government.
No, that's not right.
Let me tell you.
By Bolin.
Yeah, but Bolin paid the plane. But
the government does not give it was a private plane.
Boris, it was a private plane with a pilot that has been a Royal Air Corps pilot for. Once you are in, you are never out. linked by Mr. Webb, that was another former military officer, and I'm pretty sure that His Majesty's government knew completely what is going to happen. And actually, Gibraltar, that nowadays the Spaniards are discussing so much, the first thing the Brits did in the early days in July 1936 was to put at Franco's disposal the communication lines in Gibraltar in order that he will be able to bypass the telephone network of the Spanish system, talking to General Mola in Pamplona through British telephone lines under the sea, going to London and then to Pamplona and talking to General Mola, that was the other rebel general. But, yes, but anyway, going to your main question, I consider that today monarchy in the year 2013 or 14, in the 21st century, monarchy, let me say a strong word, is a perverse system of government. No matter where, in Spain, in the UK, in Norway, in Sweden, in Denmark, or in Belgium, wherever. Today, there is no reason why someone that has not been elected by the people should be ruling in a way the country. You put the example of Russia, and I was about to tell you, Boris, that's good, because Russia and Spain are twins, and they were behaving in the same way. Imagine that Boris Yeltsin, he was capable of doing so, has appointed Putin with the title of Tsar of all the Russias. What the hell? But Franco did it. And
Franco made it legally, and they made
well,
it illegally.
made it legally with his own laws. Oh, well. Anyway, sorry. I don't know if I answered you correctly.
Okay, Vince? Yeah, so this may sound a little off the wall here. If you look at me, you can tell that I like the hamburger. And there's a reason I associate Spain with the hamburger. When I was a boy, I lived in Sevilla, 1979 and 1980.
I didn't know that.
And when my family, when we were there, we got desperate for American hamburger meat, and our family, we walked all over 1979, 1980 Sevilla, and I got to know that city very well as a boy, looking for American-style ground beef. And we found a place across the Guadalquivir River from where I lived in Roche Lambert, and we found an American expatriate, and he had a hamburger joint, and it was very gristly beef. But I loved it as a kid. My parents were appalled.
Yeah, I guess.
My point is that Sevilla at that time was, like, for example, the Giralda de Sevilla was black, and you could look at the cathedral, and it was, acid rain and really damaged it. And you walked around the city, and I have strong memories of the smell of urine in the streets, and and I hate to word it, but that developing world smell that I smelled in Afghanistan and other places. It was there, and
yeah, I believe you.
And the quality of buildings, like falling over buildings and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, then I went back in 2007, and the first thing I saw when I drove in, I was driving in from Portugal, and I went into Sevilla, and the first thing I saw was a burger. And I remember it was important to me to see that. and I actually told my wife, I was like, I'm going right in there, because I associate this place with the search for beef. And I want a hamburger at this Burger King.
And now you found McDonald's.
So, yeah, I did. So I would eat, I had this kind of wonderful experience of eating a hamburger at the Burger King in Sevilla in 2007. And when we went around Sevilla this time, I had this very strong vision of the Sevilla of 1979, 1980 era. And then compared to 2007, the Giralda was clean. I mean, it was just beautiful. It smelled good. I mean, it's just this wonderful place for tourists that was not that way when I was there. And so, you're talking about political corruption, and you're talking about the problems. But as just an outsider, and the difference between 1979, 1980, and 2007 anyway, was
of course.
jaw-dropping.
No, of course. Of course, political crisis, economical crisis, and corruption has nothing to do even with modern development that is taking place, either if you like it or not, because the world is moving. But in Sevilla experienced a big development when in the year 2000, I think, took place the International Expo in Seville. And then they cleaned the city, they established a high-speed train from Madrid straight forward to Seville, and of course, and even Barcelona. Barcelona was a nice city, but was pretty much, like you said, in Seville. But then the Olympics came to Barcelona for whatever reason, and Barcelona experienced a big development as well, and was clean. Yeah, I mean, of course. Yeah.
My experience in Spain is really limited to Rota and Madrid on the first day the modern airport opened up, and the chaos there, and the gymnastics against my plane. But I used to train, I forget what you call it, bomb techs for the Spanish National Police, the Guardia or whatever it is. Yeah, and several of them came from villages. Probably, because we're not too bright, who goes into, bomb technicians, and get on your fingers and toes, it's our symbol.
Absolutely.
But the dichotomy between them and those from, say, the city. Now, this is traditional throughout the world in many ways, rural and urban folk. But having lived most of my military career in the third world, or what we call the third world, or the developing world, whatever the common new PC word is, there's always been a dichotomy where the best example was in Uzbekistan, where I was talking to some villagers, not even a village, actually, it's a group of stones that kind of, and they had to walk about a mile to get well water. And I said, well, why don't you talk to the government? They do well, everything. They'll bring in electricity, and they look at you and says, no, that's what brings the government. And in a sense, is there still like areas in Spain? Some of the kids that I trained basically had nothing to do, it's like my village, my area, is the only thing that's really important to me. And even though I'm in this national army or police force or whatever it is, I'm going back there, and that's what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah, many people think that way. Honestly, I don't know if such, let's say, low-income areas still exist. Yeah, I suppose so, because even in Italy, I have been in places where I was thinking that I was in Afghanistan or wherever, in Reggio Calabria. But I suppose, especially in Galicia or in Andalusia, there are still places where they don't have electricity, and even they don't care.
Well, no, it's not just electricity, it's their own little insular world. It's like you step outside and you get a couple of kilometers, and these people are living almost, would understand, Moses would understand how they built their homes. Moses would understand how they lived. I mean, it's not that much different, and this is throughout Turkey, the Middle East. You step out of the metropolitan areas, and you are back in some sort of previous.
Let me tell you, I don't know exactly, but yesterday John was pointing at me, a friend of yours living in southern Spain and living in a house that was a cave, isn't it? Or who was it? It was you, sorry. We were together for a minute. It was Randy. Randy has a friend that retired to live in Spain and his house is a cave in a mountain. But of course, I don't know if you follow. Yeah. I don't know.
They definitely have luxury caves.
I don't.
Okay, let me just preface.
Sorry about
we
that.
need to break for lunch more or less at noon. Just a little bit. So I'm going to move that. Randy, you had one question.
Okay, and this is my friend Bill, and I've been friends since high school. We went to college together. He and his wife planned to retire to Spain for a decade. They moved to this region north of Malaga, about an hour, sort of between Malaga and Granada. And 15,000 to 20,000 people in the village who live in a cave with a
probably, because, it's like I said, everybody is lying to everybody. I mean, people evade taxes. So, one way of doing things is everything in cash, nobody knows, and there is a big flow. Spain, as I got some understanding, was the country where more bank notes of 500 euros was having in circulation, more than in Germany, wherever, because they were paying cash and then doing deals in the black market or whatever, and paying even cars and whatever with 500 euros notes. So, yeah.
Bienvenido. 15 seconds.
Sorry about that, John.
Just one question. Would you prefer what happened to Singapore, where they gave up democracy for progress? Singapore cannot claim
No,
to be
not really. Bienvenido. I do believe that democracy, in the sense Lois said, democracy means progress, in my opinion. If democracy is not real, then there is no progress, of course. But real democracy must bring along progress. This is what I mean.
Right, well, could I just mention briefly that Bob and I went to Spain first in 1956.
Wow.
We went to Spain in 1970.
And it was a big change, of course.
71. But there was still, both of those were Franco times. We went to Spain, Bob had a Fulbright in Spain in 1977-78. In other words, during the transition period.
Yeah.
And while we were there, I mean, I can remember that they had a funeral for Largo Caballero, who was a leader in the Spanish Civil War.
Yes.
And La Pasionaria came back from Russia. She was still alive.
Yeah.
You know.
She came straight forward from Moscow on the day the Communist Party was made legal. And I think most of the key people in the Politburo said farewell to Dolores Ibarruri at Sheremetyevo Airport.
No, she officially appointed, she remained the leader of the party, and Chavo Kadyrov was of course the chief, and remained the chief, but he was staunch Stalinist, and all pretension to Euro-communism.
No.
Continued to receive money from the KGB until the end of the communist regime.
The lady, yes, Carrillo was different, of course, yeah. But Dolores, in the end, poor lady, she died not long afterwards. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you so much. Excellent.